celebrate its 15th anniversary and to progress towards our promise of delivering our absolutely essential $1 billion CERF annual budget. First, a few quick housekeeping notes. We have participants both online and here with us in person at UN headquarters in New York. For those of us who are joining us virtually, if I could just remind you to keep your microphones muted unless you have the floor. We invite all of our participants, whether online or in person, to access the interpretation services that are available in the 6 official languages of the UN. This event is also being live streamed on UN TV. Our session will open with the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and UN Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mr. Martin Griffiths, who is here beside me. And our distinguished speakers in today's opening segment also include Her Excellency, Ms. Anniken Huitfeldt, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway, His Excellency, Mr. Theodore Oloksen, Jr., Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines, Her Excellency, Mrs. Helene Marie Lorenz Ilbudu Marshall, Minister of Women, National Solidarity, Family, and Humanitarian Action of Burkina Faso, and His Excellency, Mr. France Fayot, Minister for Development and Cooperation and Humanitarian Affairs of Luxembourg. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, sends his regrets that he is unable to join us today. He was very eager to be here. As you all know, he is a strong advocate of CERF and also of the work it allows the humanitarians to do. Mr. Guterres has asked Undersecretary General Martin Griffiths to deliver his remarks on his behalf instead. Mr. Griffiths, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me personally to deliver the Secretary General's remarks in his name, as well as to share with you, as we've heard, his deep regret that he couldn't join us today. 15 years ago, the Central Emergency Response Fund, the CERF, was set up to promote swift, coordinated action in humanitarian crises. Since then, in these 15 years, it has more than fulfilled its mission. CERF is indeed fast and flexible. I know from personal experience that it is one of the most effective ways to get help to people in crises. CERF responds in hours, so humanitarian organizations can swing into action as soon as emergencies strike. CERF is principled, it is impartial, it is independent, and the help it provides is driven by need alone. CERF supports neglected crises when others do not. It listens to women, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable groups, and it prioritizes their needs. Last year, more than half of the recipients of CERF funding were women and girls, more than half. CERF is also the biggest direct donor to humanitarian programs that responded to gender-based violence. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, CERF is a proven success story. And that is because it is constantly evolving, applying lessons learned, embracing innovation in response to risks that are more complex, intertwined, and global. At the heart of these innovative efforts is the concept of anticipatory action. This is about making financing available before risks turn into full-blown emergencies. It is about assistance that is faster, cheaper, and more humane, informed by state-of-the-art data and analytics. We know anticipatory action works. For example, when forecasts indicated pending drought in Somalia, CERF funding ensured that families could feed their children without having to sell off precious assets for the survival of their family. Similar pilots are now underway in 11 countries, and to scale up, these innovative approaches, CERF is now teaming up with a new complex risk analytics fund. This is an alliance between the best data and analysis and the fastest funding mechanism for smarter anticipation, prevention, and response to crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, this year has been one of the most difficult on record for humanitarian need, but CERF has stepped up to the challenge. In 2020, CERF helped close to 70 million people, twice as many as the year before, many of them reeling from the impact of the pandemic. CERF released its first multi-country grants in recognition of the fact that the virus, COVID-19, does not respect national borders, and it introduced an NGO allocation to boost support for responders in the very front lines of delivery. When violence escalated in northern Ethiopia, CERF released several allocations at critical moments to help save lives. In August, as Afghanistan was thrown into upheaval, CERF swiftly released funding so that United Nations agencies could scale up their emergency response and keep basic services running, and particularly in the health sector. As acute hunger surged and the risk of famine grew for millions of people, CERF allocated funding for food assistance to some of the hardest hit countries: Burkina Faso, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Nigeria, South Sudan, and Yemen. And CERF offered help, hope, and solidarity to those caught up in neglected crises, such as from Venezuela to Cameroon and to Chad. Ladies and gentlemen, I know everyone here today, like the Secretary General, for whom I am speaking, believes strongly in CERF. You are part of CERF's success story. Thanks to the generosity of its 130 donors, CERF has released $7.5 billion to save lives and protect people in more than 100 countries over the last 15 years. Today, humanitarian needs are seven times what they were when CERF was created 15 years ago. We've seen prolonged conflicts worsen and new ones break out. Climate change is pushing communities to the brink of survival, and the battle with COVID-19, as we see so vividly these days, is yet to be won. The scale of today's crises demands a strong CERF with the resources it needs to rise to the challenge of responding swiftly at the onset of an emergency. Member states have shown full support for this. In 2016, you called for CERF to be doubled, as we have heard, to reach $1 billion. This year, despite the generosity of our donors, we didn't get close to reaching that goal. But we can do so. If member states allocate just a small percentage of their humanitarian funding through CERF each year. CERF is a spark of hope in a difficult and shadowed world. Let us light that spark for the sake of our shared humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for reading that statement by the Secretary General. And I would now like to introduce a video that illustrates some of CERF's many accomplishments during its integration and inception, sorry.
When CERF was established 15 years ago, it was a breakthrough for humanitarian organizations worldwide. It meant fast and flexible funding available to them anytime and anywhere. CERF is a fund for all, by all. In a complex world where millions of people need humanitarian aid, CERF has grown, ensuring that humanitarian frontline workers can respond faster and better. CERF contributed to the massive humanitarian responses in Haiti and Syria. Since 2018, CERF has piloted anticipatory action in 12 countries. "2020 was a year like no other, but CERF's innovative approaches allowed humanitarian partners to operate and deliver record-high assistance despite the challenges of COVID. The first ever global pandemic allocation, and the first ever allocation to fight gender-based violence. This year, CERF's speed has been crucial to help scale up the humanitarian response in Afghanistan. To approve funds within 1 day for critical assistance in Haiti. To help humanitarian partners stave off potential famine, and to deliver life-saving humanitarian assistance and protection in Ethiopia. With your help, we can reach the $1 billion target and save more lives. Together, we continue to innovate. Together, we are making a difference. Investing in CERF is an investment in humanity.
I now give the floor back to Mr. Griffiths, who will speak in his own capacity. Martin.
Thanks, Melissa. This is me again, but this is me now. Here we go. So let me also personally welcome everyone here and online in my capacity as Under Secretary General and Emergency Relief Coordinator. Thank you very much for being here. That alone is testimony to your commitment. We're here to celebrate CERF's achievements, and we have heard about them just now, on its 15th anniversary, and to commit ourselves to its successful future. So for the past 15 years, CERF has indeed saved and protected millions of people when they needed it the most. As you've already heard, CERF reached close to 70 million people last year. It provided 42 million people with health care, got food assistance to 16 million, delivered water and sanitation to 12 million, provided protection for 9 million, and nutrition support to 4 million. And the majority of all those beneficiaries were women and girls. This year, you came through generously providing $553 million to CERF for this year, 2021. As a result, we expect to reach our second highest allocation level, helping people across 34 countries. CERF continued to demonstrate its role as one of the humanitarian system's most effective and efficient funding instrument. It is agile. As we saw there, when an earthquake hit Haiti in August, CERF allocated $8 million within 32 hours for the needs of the people there. The people of Afghanistan and Ethiopia, again, as we just heard, received CERF support at critical junctures this year as their crises escalated and adapted. CERF is strategic. In Bangladesh, Somalia, and 10 other crises, CERF is helping to chart system-wide change towards anticipatory action, as the Secretary General just mentioned, to enable people to get ahead of crises, to protect their assets, feed their children, avoid long-term displacement. CERF is principled. It was a lifeline for close to 10 million people caught in underfunded crises in 12 countries. And it also funded 4 critical areas that are consistently under-resourced in direct appeals to the generosity of member states, including programs serving women and girls, people living with disabilities, as well as emergency education and protection services. But CERF operates in a world with ever-deepening vulnerability. COVID-19 is still with us. Prolonged conflicts in Syria, in Yemen, and elsewhere continue to fester, while conflict worsens in Ethiopia and instability is rife from Myanmar through to the Sahel. The effects of the climate crisis are devastating the lives of vulnerable people who face prolonged and repeat droughts, more intense storms, and debilitated ecosystems. These multiple drivers have left us with a record number of people in need as we go through to the next year. In the 15 years since CERF was established, the number of people in the humanitarian sector that has set out to reach have grown more than sixfold in these 15 years, from 32 million 15 years ago to 183 million in the year to come. Recognizing that this massive uptick in needs required a commensurate rise in funding, 5 years ago, as we've heard, member states committed to a $1 billion CERF, a promise which was later endorsed by the General Assembly. 5 years on, we're not there yet. We're still far from reaching that goal, even in the year of unprecedented suffering. So meeting $1 billion for CERF requires all of us to step up. I am proud. I think everyone here today is also proud that the CERF is a fund for all and by all. 130 member states, private sector, international organizations contribute to CERF, 130. I'm deeply grateful to each of them and to you. But at the same time, it is also true that only 10 donors, the most generous, provide the vast majority of CERF's resources. So now we all need to commit to make CERF even stronger 2022 when the numbers in need are growing. So many lives depend on the decisions that we make here today. And I am grateful, finally, Melissa, I'm grateful to all here for their support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. And we will now hear a statement recorded by Her Excellency Mrs. Anniken Huitfeldt, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway.
Secretary General, Under Secretary General, Excellencies, colleagues, congratulations to CERF on its 15th anniversary. For 15 years, the Central Emergency Response Fund has assisted people affected by crises across the world. When earthquakes struck Haiti, when floods hit South Sudan, when violence broke out in Ethiopia, CERF has responded rapidly and effectively. Over the years, CERF has more than proven its worth. To give you a recent example, when the COVID-19 crisis hit us all, transport and distribution of food and medical supplies came to an abrupt halt. For the countries in humanitarian crisis, this was disastrous. CERF took the lead and quickly released funds. And as a result, humanitarian agencies were able to continue operations and save lives. Sexual and gender-based violence has increased during the pandemic. CERF has supported organizations working to empower women and fight the shadow pandemic of violence against women. The fund delivers on its mandate, and Norway has been a strong and committed supporter of CERF from the start. Overall, we have been the 4th largest donor to the fund. Predictable and early funding is vital to ensure CERF's effectiveness. I'm therefore proud to announce that Norway will contribute 1,800,000 Norwegian kroner over the next 4 years. This is a significant increase from the current allocation. We will also top up our contribution this year with 40 million Norwegian kroner. We must ensure that CERF can continue to provide urgently needed humanitarian assistance for crisis-affected people in Haiti, South Sudan and Ethiopia, and many other places. is a matter of life or death. Thank you.
Thanks to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway and also for that generous announcement. And now I invite His Excellency, Mr. Teodoro Locsin, Jr., Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines, to deliver remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mr. Martin Griffiths, Excellencies, for the last 20 months, humanity has endured a crisis of a scale in pain, loss, and economic destruction never seen in our lifetime. COVID has taken more than 5 million lives, and the grim reaping goes on. It brought economies to their knees. It has shaken health systems of rich and poor countries to breaking point and robbed our people of mental and social well-being. And yet, in this bleak scenario, armed conflict continues in parts of the world, and people displacement goes on. The COVID situation is so much worse in refugee and evacuation camps. Meanwhile, natural disasters, caused or exacerbated by worsening climate crisis, continues unabated, even if polluted cities finally saw sunlight for a while, as traffic and industrial activity stopped. Tens of millions of people, already vulnerable without the pandemic, have been so pounded from all sides that only a lifeline decides if they live or die. The Central Emergency Relief Fund is such a lifeline. It served that function for my people devastated by Typhoon Haiyan. It tided over tens of thousands of my countrymen after jihadists took Marawi, though our great General Galvez took it back in 6 months when it took the Western Alliance 6 years to take back Raqqa. It is the speediest, most flexible funding mechanism in the UN. Indeed, money is the panacea. It matters not where from it comes. Gandhi said, money has no smell. Money is the one thing we can throw at these problems and solve them. For Haiyan's victims, Filipino families spared the storm, cooked and packed meals for the victims. The food spoiled in container trucks backed up for miles. They were thrown in the sea. The personal touch of cooking felt good, but as newspaper publisher, I urge the public to give money, not food. Money never spoils. It is the most versatile assistance, enabling the purchase of necessities or the trading thereof, and thereby rewards enterprise. In this pandemic, the US, Europe, and Japan threw trillions of dollars for the relief, not of the reckless rich as in the 2008 financial crisis, but to save the very system of free enterprise that is still the best one to make wealth. Equitable distribution is a separate issue that is rendered moot if there is nothing to spread around. CERF is not asking trillions, though that should get the job done honestly and effectively, saving suffering and mortally threatened humanity. But for God's grace, we would be among them. UN OCHA needs our support, the support of CERF. That is why, despite domestic financial constraints, we commit $200,000 to CERF. I'd give much more, but I might be made to repay it. We strongly encourage others, including the fund's beneficiaries, to contribute also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, also for your impassioned statement and your generous support. I now give the floor to Her Excellency, Mrs. Helene Marie Lorenz Ildordo Machel, Minister of Women, National Solidarity, Family, and Humanitarian Action of Burkina Faso.
Monsieur le sous-secrétaire général.
Under the Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, representative of the Secretary General, distinguished delegates, I'm happy to take the floor this afternoon during the pledging event for the Central Emergency Response Fund, CERF. First of all, I would like to convey to you the greetings of the President of Burkina Faso, His Excellency, Mr. Cambodia, and of his government. Also, I would like to express to you the gratitude of the government for having associated Burkina Faso for the first time in this important pledging event. This shows the interest of the United Nations and CERF in the situation in Burkina Faso. Distinguished delegates, this is a very timely event. It is in line with the appeal launched by His Excellency Mr. Kabore for international solidarity with Burkina Faso, where we are undergoing unprecedented humanitarian crisis. The attacks of unidentified armed groups continue, resulting in massive displacements of people. 1,400,000 people are impacted by the displacement in the wake of the October crisis, out of which 22% are women and many children. We remain the most impacted by the forced displacement in the Central Sahel region. More than 2.6 million of our people are threatened by food insecurity, according to the analysis conducted in November. This is a result of floods, droughts in several regions of the country in the course of this year. And this is impacting 12% of our population. The COVID-19 pandemic also has an impact in several social sectors, and it underscored the vulnerability of our people. All of these factors resulted to growing vulnerability of households and in the negative impact socially, developmentally, and when it comes to subsistence. The humanitarian situation of the country remains very concerning, despite the efforts made by the government and partners, because we need to take care of those people who are displaced and those people who live in difficult security-related areas. And the needs continue growing, and the access to many areas is difficult, and resources remain insufficient. Given this context and various kinds of fragility, we have constantly been supported by international solidarity and constant and much appreciated support by CERF. Since CERF was created in 2006, Burkina Faso received a total of $94 from the fund. And in 2020, the Burkina Faso, with $6 million was one of the 6 priority countries having received funds for famine prevention. In 2021, we had a total of $11 million and our country was therefore ranked 12th in the ranking of the beneficiaries of CERF. And that is why, given this, I would like to, in my capacity as Minister in charge of Humanitarian Action, express on behalf of my government all of my gratitude to CERF for their constant support to Burkina Faso. I can assure you that this support is fundamental for us as we implement the Humanitarian Response Fund, and we have thus been able to extend humanitarian assistance to people who are impacted by this displacement in the wake of a security crisis. Distinguished delegates, given the contribution that CERF makes to countries in the crisis, I would like to launch an urgent appeal to member states, various donors, to strengthen their financial support to CERF, to enable them to meet the humanitarian assistance needs in the world through rapid and larger allocations. For my part, I would like to say that we are dealing with various crises, and this limits our capacity to contribute, but we remain attached to solidarity amongst people, and that's why very soon we will announce our contribution to the common fund CERF. Before concluding, I would like to yet once again express the gratitude of my country, Burkina Faso, to the United Nations systems and international community for the constant support from which we have benefited. I would like to also reassure the international community and all of the humanitarian organizations that the government of Burkina Faso remains determined and will spare no effort to guarantee the protection and dignity to the displaced people in the wake of security crisis and to these people who live in insecure situations, in the strict respect of international commitments. Long live the Central Emergency Response Fund and long live the international solidarity. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister, and especially thank you for sharing what it means to be a beneficiary of CERF and how vital it is to your people who've been in crisis and saving their lives and preserving their dignity. Thank you, Your Excellency. And now I have the pleasure to invite His Excellency, Mr. Franz Fayot, Luxembourg's Minister for Development Cooperation and Humanitarian Affairs, who is here with us in New York. Thank you, sir. Please deliver your remarks.
Thank you very much, Monsieur le Secretary.
And Secretary General, dear Martin, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a common goal that brings us here together today, namely that of providing more effective, more reactive and more predictable humanitarian assistance. Assistance which responds to the immediate needs of the people affected by the various crises which are increasingly changing and complex. Aid which also responds to future needs by improving the resilience of the most vulnerable sectors of the population. Luxembourg is very concerned at the worsening of the humanitarian situation in the world, and it's with consternation that we have seen the number of people affected by humanitarian crises reaching a new and sad record in 2021. The situation is made even worse by the consequences of the pandemic, which has been going on now for almost 2 years. To that, we must add the climate disasters, which are triggering more displacements than conflict and violence. In 2020, 9.8 million new displacements were triggered by conflict and violence, whereas 30.7 million were caused by disasters. These figures should remind us of our collective responsibility to respond to increasingly complex crises, to reduce the loss in human lives, whilst at the same time preserving the dignity of those affected by these crises. Our duty is to leave no one behind, and that's even more urgent today, and it will be even more important again in the years to come. We must redouble our efforts to anticipate crises and avoid them becoming long-term. We must support people who need protection and humanitarian assistance. The efforts begun by OCHA for more upstream humanitarian action, supported financially by CERF, are pioneers in this regard. Increasingly prolonged crises are present, and therefore Luxembourg has tried to operationalize the link between humanitarian action and long-term development, particularly in the Sahel, where we have been present for a long time. This is not simply a matter of the networking and coordination of our main partners, but also involves a multi-annual commitment to humanitarian funds. By our contributions to CERF, and particularly our emergency desk, Luxembourg also aims to provide a response to prolonged crises that do not have sufficient attention on the part of the donors. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our duty to enable humanitarian actors to react swiftly and early to crises. The rapid and effective disbursement of humanitarian funds plays a fundamental role in this regard. These principles will be included in the new strategy for humanitarian action of Luxembourg that will soon be published. The good donorship will be at the heart of this strategy, and CERF, as well as other trust funds, will be able to make our action more effective, and they are essential instruments in this context. With regard to the most urgent disbursements dealt with in less than 2 business days, CERF continues to demonstrate its fundamental role in providing a rapid response to humanitarian crises. And therefore, it's only natural that Luxembourg has supported CERF since it was created in 2006, and that's why over the years we have increased our financial support to it. In line with our commitments stated at the World Humanitarian Summit and the Grand Bargain, we have also decided to equip the fund with multi-annual predictability, and that since 2017. Under Secretary-General, it is with pleasure that I announce today that we plan to continue this good practice and maintain our financial support to CERF in 2023 and 2024 at the same level as it was for the period 2021 to 2022 in the amount of €10 million spread over 2 years. Excellencies, dear colleagues, I speak to you today not only to announce the contributions of Luxembourg to CERF, but also to launch an appeal to the community of donors to redouble our collective efforts to support CERF and to further increase our multi-annual, flexible and non-earmarked contributions. This is the only way to address the multiplying crises in the world and to counter the negative trends with regard to the number of people that are requiring humanitarian assistance. We have to act now. Allow me to quote here Benjamin Franklin, who said, "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." What was true more than 200 years ago is even more true today. Luxembourg is therefore and will continue to be a trustworthy partner of CERF, particularly with regard to the important role that it plays in the context of underfunded and forgotten crises, as well as for its upstream activities that have recently been undertaken. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, and especially for being a founding member since its creation and your multi-year predictable funding pledges over the years. I think that is what we all hope for, flexible, unearmarked, as you said, and really there to support not just the surprise crises, but the neglected crises that attract so little funding. So I'd like to thank you for being here and all of our distinguished speakers today for your interventions, for your pledges of support, and I do hope that this conference results in many more pledges and the $1 billion goal that we really hope to achieve. You've all certainly underlined the continuing importance of CERF and the need for all of us to work together to achieve its targets. So now we've come to an end of this opening segment, and after a brief pause to allow not much of a transition at the podium, because the transition involves my turning over my moderator role to Martin Griffiths. And thank you very much for having me, and all the best.
Thank you very much. Here we are again. Thanks a lot, Melissa. That was very deft. And we're now into the main segment. Before opening the floor to the speakers and to His Excellency, of course, the President of Estonia, I would like to introduce another short video highlighting CERF as a driver of change. Can we have that video now, looking at climate and anticipatory action? Thank you. I can't. Is that coming? Good.
Humanitarian aid workers are already on the front lines of the climate emergencies, and they have seen record-breaking floods, droughts, wildfires, and heat waves. But things are going to get a lot worse. The global average temperature is set to increase with devastating effect. We now need all the help we can get if we're to reach those people in need. Fortunately, we have tools that can help us predict those needs and act early to prevent suffering. And together with our partners, OCHA has shown that anticipatory action works. We're providing $140 million to cover similar efforts in other countries, but we're going to need additional funds to scale up those efforts. All of us must ensure that aid is as anticipatory as possible and only as reactive as necessary. We cannot fail the people we serve. That cost is too high.
Thank you very much. Now, before we start this segment, can I just remind all speakers to try to stick to the limit of 2 minutes each? I know that's difficult, but it's necessary if we are to get through a very long list of speakers before we are obliged to leave this room, which I will have to do at 1 p.m. anyway. And those who have not yet spoken by that time will be cut, but will be, of course, have the opportunity to put their remarks onto our website, so they won't be lost. But therefore, it does mean if we can stick to 2 minutes each, that would be very helpful. I'm flanked here by Julie and Khalid from OCHA, who will be making sure that we keep in the right direction. Thank you very much. These are people who know a lot about the subject that we are addressing today. Julie from the Pooled Fund Management Branch and Khalid from our Partnership External Relations section. And so without any further delay, Sir, His Excellency the President of Estonia, over to you, sir.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are here today in a situation that we all hoped was over within a year. Sadly, this is not the case. New virus strain named Omicron continues to haunt us, while the humanitarian needs are at all-time high. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has fundamentally reshaped the current landscape, and in our role is to find solutions to respond to a way that does not further exacerbate existing inequalities and stall future economic and social development. The Central Emergency Response Fund cannot be praised highly enough. It has played an essential life-saving role enabling rapid humanitarian assistance to people in need as quickly and efficiently as possible. In 15 years, the CERF has rightfully earned the trust and confidence of the UN member states, who continue to show the commitments via pledges to the fund. It is essential that CERF's humanitarian partners will be able to continue to provide life-saving assistance such as healthcare, water and sanitation, food assistance and nutrition support, shelter and protection to crisis-affected people who no other funding is available. During our time in the Security Council for the past 2 years, we have seen horrific humanitarian situations up close. Estonia, as a signatory to the Grand Bargain Commitment, has been a long-standing contributor to the CERF. In fact, Estonia was the very first contributor to CERF. Today, Excellencies, I'm delighted to affirm our continuing support to the fund. This year we will continue with our donation as agreed, and for the next year we will increase our contribution of 50% compared to 2020. With ever-growing humanitarian needs and the unfortunate funding cap, we need all the help we can get to alleviate the ever-growing humanitarian needs. I thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you for your generosity. I hand the floor to the representative of the Netherlands.
Mr. Guterres, Mr. Griffith, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, CERF supports survivors of gender-based violence like Alice in the DRC and has provided Nadia in Mozambique with shelter after a cyclone. These are only two of the inspiring stories I found on the CERF website. They illustrate the difference that CERF can make in the lives of people in need. For 15 years, CERF's story has been one of compelling simplicity, a story of global reach and impact, flexibility and speed, and a remarkable ability to adapt to changes in the humanitarian landscape. High-quality funding enables high-quality responses. That's why the Netherlands, partnering with CERF by providing multi-annual support, is a no-brainer. There is still a clear need for a flexible, predictable, multi-year, high-quality humanitarian funding. So more donors should follow suit. Addressing them, I want to make a case for CERF. Its setup and operations deserve robust support, so it can make a difference for countless others like Alice and Nadia. In view of the current level of humanitarian needs and of CERF's exceptional strength, the Netherlands will renew its support. As Mr. Griffiths has put it, this is the moment to double down on principled humanitarian action. So in 2022 and the 3 subsequent years, the Netherlands will support CERF with an annual contribution of 55 million euros. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much also for the announcement and your generosity and your continuing support. I hand the floor to the representative of Germany, Federal Republic.
Dear Martin, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me be very clear at the outset. In our opinion, the CERF is and has been a success story. In the 15 years since its inception, the fund has become a highly regarded and efficient tool, enabling the humanitarian system to act more swiftly and also to function as a driver of innovation. The outstanding flexibility is one of its key features. The rapid response allocation for Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh is just one example for a timely response. Funds were made available in only 2 working days, which enabled humanitarian workers to spring into action almost immediately. Second, CERF is a driver of innovation. For example, CERF Anticipatory Action pilots in Somalia and Ethiopia have been instrumental in proving that it is better to act before a disaster strikes. This is exactly the paradigm shift we need. The humanitarian system must be as anticipatory as possible and only as reactive as necessary. And we have ample evidence from over 60 pilot projects. Anticipatory action works and is more dignified. Therefore, we support OCHA's work to scale up and mainstream anticipatory action. Since CERF's flexible funding model is reliant on a predictable and steady influx of funds, we have decided to enter with CERF into a multi-year agreement until 2023. Through this agreement, we are able to provide 50 million euro as the first of several contributions for each of these years. Moreover, we will also provide additional funds to CERF for this year. And I'm glad to announce today a top-up of 30 million euros, increasing the overall German contribution to 130 million euro for 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by wishing that CERF also in the next 15 years will continue to play a decisive role in making the humanitarian system react even better and faster. Thank you.
Thanks, Sibylle, and thank you very much for both the top-up and the multi-year commitment. That's most welcome. The floor is now handed to the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The COVID-19 pandemic's affected us all, but it's the world's most vulnerable children, women and men who are affected the most. People who are getting by are struggling to cope. People who are struggling but just about managing to cope now need humanitarian assistance. And for many, the horrific spectre of famine is looming. The seismic scale of humanitarian need is requiring an unprecedented response from the humanitarian system, and CERF is playing a critical role. As our minister set out in his opening remarks at the London Global Humanitarian Overview launch, the increase in humanitarian need is driven by a dangerous combination of conflict, COVID-19 and climate change. In November, the city of Glasgow welcomed the world to COP26, where leaders and experts came together to discuss the catastrophic impacts of climate change and again recognise that these impacts will be felt most acutely by the most vulnerable. In the face of these challenges, the humanitarian system must adapt. It must build new partnerships and harness the expertise from outside the system to prioritise funding effectively, to protect vulnerable and marginalised people, and to prevent and anticipate future crises, including by tapping into climate finance. CERF is making impressive progress in meeting the growing challenge. In particular, I'd like to pay tribute to CERF's pioneering work in the rollout of the Anticipatory Action pilot. And in September, the UK was proud to co-host a successful event on this with OCHA and Germany, at which these were rightly showcased. I certainly agree with Martin's comments when he said just now that assistance should be as anticipatory as possible and only as reactive as necessary. I also welcome CERF's action to ensure higher priority is given to tackling gender-based violence and for direct funding to NGOs supporting localisation. This year, CERF has been needed like never before, and the same will be true in 2022. I encourage CERF to continue to drive innovation, pushing donors and partners out of our comfort zones to deliver better for those we serve. The UK is proud to be a staunch partner for CERF. CERF has proven time and again that it can use our money highly effectively to save many, many lives. And as my German colleague has just said, CERF is a success story. It merits the very strongest support and the most generous funding from all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Thank you very much. I now hand the floor to Her Excellency, the Minister of Human Rights, Social Affairs and Gender of Burundi. Madame, à vous. I'm told that I should have handed the floor to Fleming in Denmark first. Representative of Denmark. There we go.
This 15 years anniversary of the CERF. Denmark has provided funding each year since 2006. We have always been among the top 10 donors. CERF is a key part of our toolbox for humanitarian action. This year, the CERF helped step up efforts in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. It plays a key role in providing fast and flexible assistance in Afghanistan and Ethiopia. And it promoted efforts against gender-based violence, something that should be included in all humanitarian action. The CERF, an example of global solidarity, a fund for all by all. The recent Global Humanitarian Overview points to the sad record. 274 million people will be in need of humanitarian assistance in 2022. That is 39 million more compared to last year. We need the CERF more than ever. That's why I'm pleased to announce additional funding for 2021 of $5.3 million to the CERF. This will bring Denmark's total support for this year to more than $31 million. I'm also pleased to announce a contribution to the CERF for 2022 of $25.7 million. I firmly believe that this investment, our long-standing support to the CERF, is one of the best ways to ensure life-saving humanitarian aid to those who need it most. I urged more countries to step up and contribute to funding for the CERF. This is a common responsibility. Please do your part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fleming. Thank you for your leadership on this. I hand the floor to His Excellency the Minister of Emergency Situations in the Gyrkus Republic.
Secretary General, colleagues, on behalf of the government of the Kyrgyz Republic and in my personal capacity, I would like to convey our high esteem for the United Nations, and I would also like to express gratitude for the close cooperation and constant support when it comes to the prevention and response to emergency situations in the Kyrgyz Republic. We highly value the contribution of all UN international organizations which are accredited in the Kyrgyz Republic, their contribution to disaster risk reduction in Kyrgyzstan. Colleagues, I also would like to underscore the importance of the UN Central Fund. We see today how CERF impacts a response to crises, to saving people in the wake of natural disasters and other disasters. From its very inception, it's been helping humanitarian organizations to swiftly start saving people. I would like to dwell on one mechanism which is active in my republic. This is an interaction between our government and the Emergency Response Coordination Group set up in 2008 so as to enhance cooperation and coordination between the government of the Kyrgyz Republic, the UN country team, the Red Cross and the Red Crescent movement, and other key actors. The cooperation between the Kyrgyz Republic and the Emergency Response Coordination Group is a very good example on how to coordinate humanitarian action in emergencies in my country. The secretariat of the group ensures that there is constant interaction with the Ministry of Emergency Situations. It assesses the needs of the impacted people and conducts information exchange with international humanitarian community. In this regard, we would like to say that we're committed to help provide effective humanitarian response globally. We understand the importance of the fund to react literally hours after disaster strikes. We support the work conducted by the Central Emergency Response Fund. And because of all that, the government of the Kyrgyz Republic decided to contribute a certain amount to the budget of the fund, and we will convey the exact amount at a later stage. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. I hand the floor to the representative of Ireland. Colm, over to you.
Let me start by thanking the Secretary General and OCHA for arranging today's event. Every year, the CERF High-Level Pledging Event offers us an opportunity to reflect. 2021 has been a year of both recovery and some setbacks, but always with strong responses and achievements under the most difficult of circumstances. So I would like to pay tribute to all those involved. As the COVID-19 pandemic entered its second year, CERF has been a beacon of global solidarity. Where long-standing crises have worsened, CERF has answered the call, responding to protracted emergencies in the Central African Republic, the DRC and Nigeria, as well as to new challenges such as the deteriorating situations in Afghanistan and Tigray. The allocation to prevent the collapse of the health sector in Afghanistan in September is a powerful example of CERF's commitment to stay and deliver despite severe challenges. CERF's balance between devoting much-needed attention to neglected emergencies and providing immediate responses to emerging disasters is strongly aligned with Ireland's own approach and priorities. Ireland applauds CERF's support to underfunded priority areas, particularly to education, in emergencies, protection of gender-based violence and people with disabilities. These activities are not only life-saving, they also ensure assistance to some of the most vulnerable people in the world. including women and girls, who continue to bear the brunt of the most humanitarian disasters. The humanitarian impact of climate change has loomed large over CERF's work in 2021. Responses to drought, floods and storms featured heavily in this year's allocations, including in Kenya, South Sudan, Fiji. Both the Horn of Africa and SIDS, though, remain priority areas for Ireland. We are glad to see scaled-up funding for anticipatory action, such as the recent allocation for early action in response to drought in Somalia. As climate disasters become more frequent, pre-positioning assistance ahead of anticipated emergencies has never been more crucial, and Ireland applauds this positive change in humanitarian system. Ireland is a proud, long-standing partner to CERF. We have contributed to the fund every year since it was established, and we are the 8th largest supporter. We remain committed to CERF, and I'm delighted that Ireland has contributed an additional $1 million for 2021 in just recent weeks. We will renew our multi-annual partnership in 2022, and we're pleased to announce that this week our contribution for next year will increase by 1.5 million. That'll bring us to a total of 11.5 million euros, approximately $13 million. We expect to maintain this level of support throughout the new partnership. The provision of protection and humanitarian assistance is a key lifeline to the most vulnerable people in the world. CERF is at the heart of this emergency response. Quite simply, getting what is needed most to where it is needed most. As Ireland approaches the halfway mark of our 2-year term on the UN Security Council, you can be assured that we will consistently and tirelessly make the case for principled humanitarian action and access for those most in need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The floor is now handed to the representative of Qatar.
In the name of God, the Merciful, the Compassionate, Secretary General of the United Nations, Under Secretary General, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. In the beginning, we would like to thank OCHA for the holding of this important event, which coincides with the 15th anniversary of CERF. Chair, the State of Qatar appreciates the pivotal role played by the United Nations system in responding to humanitarian emergencies, particularly in regard of the ongoing challenges related to COVID-19 and the climate crisis. We particularly note the acclaimed and commendable role of CERF since its inception in facilitating the provision of urgent and life-saving assistance and also in responding to emergencies effectively. We also commend the efforts undertaken by OCHA as well as international partners. Chair, the State of Qatar was amongst the first countries to approve the fund. Total contributions to date have exceeded 17 million US dollars. My country has also pledged $5 million for the fund for the period 2017-2021. The State of Qatar is also proud to be a member of the Fund's advisory group and to chair the support group of the United Nations Office for OCHA during the period extending from July 2020 to June 2021. We are pleased to announce that work is underway to sign an agreement totaling a $2 million contribution to the fund for 2021-2022 in US dollars in order to continuing to empower the fund to meet needs and enhance its role to remain at the forefront of the global entities responding to global crises in the world. In conclusion, we look forward to working closely with OCHA, and we can assure you that the State of Qatar will continue its support to CERF. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I hand the floor now to Sweden. Carl, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Chair, and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. As we gather here today to acknowledge the 15th anniversary of the Central Emergency Fund, it is against the backdrop of a world that is facing unprecedented levels of humanitarian needs. Since the establishment of the CERF, Sweden has been the second largest donor. We are proud that CERF keeps delivering on its mandate to deploy resources both flexibly and rapidly. This is crucial for the humanitarian system's ability to ensure timely responses for the most vulnerable across the globe. In 2021, this has been instrumental in places such as Afghanistan and Yemen. Although humanitarian funding has increased over time, there is now a growing mismatch between needs and funding. And as a result, the number of underfunded humanitarian crises is growing. With the underfunded emergency window, CERF continues to be a lifeline for people caught in crisis that do not attract sufficient donor attention, but where needs remain critical. Mr. Chair, climate change has a huge impact on the humanitarian needs. We know that 20% of the climate-related disasters are predictable and that 50% are foreseeable. CERF is now doing its part in providing innovative financing that makes it possible to act ahead of crisis. This will help provide better assistance to those in need and save lives. Last month, Sweden entered into new multi-annual agreements with 7 humanitarian organizations. And I'm pleased to today announce that we now have a new multi-annual agreement, a strategic partnership agreement with the CERF, with an envelope of some $317 million to be provided between 2022 to 2025, 4 years. For 22 alone, this amounts to a pledge of some $72 million. And in light of the urgent humanitarian needs already this year, we have also decided to provide an additional contribution of some $5 million for the CERF in 2021, amounting to some $66 million in total for this year. With this ambitious pledge, Sweden wants to reaffirm its commitment to remain a generous and strategic partner to the CERF. We look forward to continuing the cooperation with OCHA on the management of this vital fund and its focus on life-saving interventions around the globe. I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed to Sweden for that history of generosity. Thank you very much, Carl. I hand the floor to Iceland, the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Chair, it is an honor to participate in this event, celebrating the 15th anniversary of the United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund. Let me begin by commending the work undertaken by CERF to deliver life-saving assistance for those in need around the world. Humanitarian needs are increasing in both magnitude and complexity. This unfortunate situation is compounded by the climate crisis and the pandemic. The fund plays an important role in allowing humanitarian actors to respond quickly and effectively when the need arises. Indeed, the fund has an important prerogative in promoting fast, coordinated, and effective humanitarian response, in addition to directing resources to underfunded emergencies. To allow for predictable annual allocation, Iceland entered last year into its second multi-year framework agreement with CERF. In line with this framework, I am pleased to confirm Iceland's allocation to the fund for 2022 in amount of 50 million ISK. In addition, given the unprecedented circumstances we are confronted with, I am happy to announce an additional allocation of 45 million ISK to the fund for 2021. This will bring our total contribution this year to 95 million. Mr. Chair, as a firm believer in the sanctity of human rights and a tireless advocate for the cause of gender equality, I want to take this opportunity to highlight the importance of a systematic focus on women and girls. There is no denying that in humanitarian crisis, women and girls become increasingly vulnerable to gender-based violence and other forms of exploitation, and when the level of poverty and hunger rises, women and girls are usually disproportionately affected. I would therefore like to conclude by thanking Mr. Griffiths for the CERF's enhanced focus on these critical issues and ensure you of Iceland's continued support in this regard. I thank you.
Many, many thanks. Thank you very much, Madame. And now the floor is with Finland, Villa.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Finland strongly favors flexible, non-earmarked and multi-year humanitarian funding. And for this reason, we have been a supporter of CERF since its inception. Successful humanitarian action takes into account the needs of persons in vulnerable situations. We commend CERF for placing additional emphasis on the support for women and girls. We must tackle gender-based violence and direct more resources to programs targeting persons with disabilities. Crises in our world are increasingly likely to be protracted. As a result, forced displacement is no longer a temporary phenomenon. It lasts an average 20 years for refugees and more than 10 years for most IDPs. Education for hundreds of millions of children is already on the line because of COVID pandemic. So CERF's investments on education in crisis is needed more than ever. We cannot lose another generation of learners. CERF's rapid response resources and support to underfunded emergencies are also needed. To truly leave no one behind, these programs must be supported. This year, Finland has negotiated a new multi-year agreement with CERF to ensure predictability and flexibility in our funding. Finland will be contributing a minimum of $8 million per year over the coming years. In addition, with humanitarian needs at the record high, we will also make a sustainable, substantial additional contribution at the end of this year. This means that our contribution to CERF will this year be higher than ever before and reach more people in need. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks very much indeed, Villa. The floor is now with His Excellency, the Deputy Foreign Minister of the Republic of Korea.
I would first like to congratulate you on the 15th anniversary of CERF and pay tribute to all the efforts and contributions that Under-Secretary General Griffiths and OCHA staff have made so far. The COVID-19 pandemic and its multifaceted impacts have widened the gap between humanitarian needs and resources. The dwindling funding to the people in need have worsened the humanitarian crisis around the world. The imbalance in the assistance provided has put the most vulnerable population into an even dire situation. CERF has proved its effectiveness in immediate response to humanitarian need. Its timely and life-saving assistance was critical to those in urgent need in 12 underfunded emergencies, including the crisis in Afghanistan, Ethiopia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. CERF also fueled the implementation of anticipatory action. Pilot initiatives of anticipatory action supported by CERF have enabled faster, more dignified, and more cost-effective response to droughts and floods. This is why we have all gathered here today to galvanize our support to CERF. The Republic of Korea has been a steadfast supporter of CERF since its establishment. From 2006 to 2021, we provided more than $60 million. Today, Korea pledges to contribute another $6 million next year. Before I close my remarks, I'd like to stress that we should continuously discuss how to allocate CERF. For example, to what extent should we use CERF's resources for anticipatory action? With the rise in underfunded emergencies and rapid response, it is critical to strike a balance between the allocation windows. The COVID-19 pandemic has opened up a new era of humanitarian crisis. The unprecedented and complex challenges call for our solidarity more than ever. The Republic of Korea will do its part to help the people in most need. I thank you very much.
And thank you very much indeed. And I hand the floor to Her Excellency, the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, of Italy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nowadays, the humanitarian community is confronted with rising needs and vulnerabilities all over the world, especially in emergency contexts where the crises are every day more protracted and severe. Fragile people continue to bear the brunt of man-made and natural disasters, and as international donors, we struggle to keep pace with the mounting humanitarian funding gap. That is why investing in effective tools such as the Central Emergency Response Fund becomes not only necessary but also vital. CERF has provided life-saving assistance to millions of people worldwide by allocating resources to humanitarian partners on the front line, to whom we show the greatest gratitude. Its role is vital in providing timely financial support, as demonstrated by the allocations in response to the deteriorating humanitarian contexts in Afghanistan and Ethiopia, for instance. The fund plays a unique role also with regard to anticipatory action, which allows the humanitarian workers to act before the onset of predictable shock. This makes the response faster, dignified, and cheaper. For this reason, the Italian support to CERF has been continuously increasing over the last years. This year, we have devoted a record amount of 11 million euros, and I'm pleased to inform you that we will contribute with a 4 million euro top-up before the end of the year in order to replenish the fund for its support to Afghanistan. As far as next year is concerned, we will contribute with 10 million euros, of which other 4 million euro in order to replenish the CERF for its continuous support to Afghanistan. Moreover, we intend to provide additional funding of the order of 5 million euros during the year for specific regional crises, and we will pledge it formally in due time. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much for those various pledges. I hand the floor to the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt.
Secretary General, Under Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, Egypt is of the view that the rules governing the strengthening of capacity of CERF, neutrality, independence, and integrity, but also avoiding the politicization, non-interference in internal affairs, and having the consent of the country concerned in coordination with national authorities to make sure the action is targeted and is not misused. We are we want to contribute towards the assistance to, in particular, combat the pandemic through our Partnership for Development is sending emergency assistance to a number of African countries, and as well as development assistance. We have a medical entity. We sent medical convoys and experts for humanitarian action. Ladies and gentlemen, we reaffirm our commitments to cooperate with UN entities, in particular OCHA. Egypt continues also making voluntary contributions, which were announced during the 33rd Conference of Red Cross and Red Crescent in Geneva. We also reaffirm our full support to the UN system and the humanitarian efforts made by the UN. I thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. I hand the floor to the representative of Guatemala, Madame Carrillo.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. It's an honor for us to participate at this high-level meeting commemorating 15 years of rapid humanitarian assistance. I'd like to highlight some things that the Secretary General and the USG said, and the coordinator of emergency relief. They described the humanitarian situation around the world, which has been worsened terribly by the COVID-19 pandemic. On behalf of the Foreign Affairs Minister of Guatemala, I'd like to thank you for this forum today. Guatemala is one of the 110 countries that benefit from CERF's funds, which have helped Guatemalans affected by tropical storms such as Eta and Iota. It's not the first time that my country has witnessed the very many demonstrations of help from the United Nations through its various funds, agencies and programs, showing solidarity towards our population during a time of crisis. I take this opportunity to highlight that in September this year we launched our response plan for humanitarian needs in Guatemala, led by the country humanitarian team and OCHA, which attempts to bring about better coordination and coherence in identifying priority areas for humanitarian assistance. Guatemala recognizes that economic growth and sustainable growth are indispensable for prevention, preparation, and mitigation of natural disasters. And with this plan, we are strengthening the basis to be more resilient, given the high level of vulnerability in parts of our country and the effects of climate change, which exacerbate the frequency and seriousness of the natural disasters that strike us. And we trust in humanity. We need to invest in sustainability in the long term. That is good investment for today's and future generations. I reiterate our thanks to the UN system for supporting the efforts of the government of Guatemala to build a better country and find sustainable solutions that can empower those affected by providing assistance to help them be resilient and take a positive role in their community. We continue to support CERF. It's a fund for everyone, by everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and very good to hear of its utility and value to the people of Guatemala. I hand the floor to the representative of Switzerland, Manuel.
Thank you very much, Emergency Relief Coordinator, Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. 15 years of CERF. I think there are good reasons to be impressed by the long journey that the CERF made since its foundation. This year again, CERF has demonstrated its unique comparative advantage. Perhaps three highlights. First, CERF is the tool to enable us to act in crises that do not attract donor funding and where the response to critical needs are chronically underfunded, such as particularly and very often gender-based violence. We congratulate in this regard CERF for the flexible and innovative allocation in response to the GBV shadow pandemic. In particular, we appreciate that a considerable amount of this funding, of CERF funding, was channeled to local women-led and women's rights organizations. Second, comparative advantage, the CERF has become a key instrument for improving the international humanitarian system by promoting new and forward-looking approaches to push a positive and transformative change. We heard it now several times. Switzerland also congratulates the CERF in driving innovative, anticipatory humanitarian action ahead of predictable, particularly climate-related humanitarian shocks. We all know anticipatory action mitigates the shock, reduces human suffering, helps to enhance resilience, and makes resources more efficient. We would like to encourage, in this regard, to continue exploring options to further integrate anticipatory action to the fund or into the fund. Third, CERF is not only providing time-critical response, CERF brings the system, the ecosystem together. Through CERF, the partnership among the actors is reinforced, and the challenges that we face today and that we face tomorrow can be better addressed. It's a unique instrument that we have to take care of, And of course, Switzerland is also very much committed to continue its support to the CERF also in the years to come with at least our 5 million annual contribution. I want to emphasize at least. Finally, Martin, to you, to the SG in particular, a great thank you for your leadership and also for the advocacy that you do for the CERF amongst member states, the private sector, and the humanitarian community. Last but not least, I want also to thank the CERF Secretariat. I know how a lot of work is behind the scenes, and it's important and crucial. In this regard, we are happy to count on a reliable secretariat that performs. Thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thanks a lot, Manuel, and thank you for your thanks indeed to the Secretariat for their utter professionalism in what is often a very fast-moving situation through the months of the year. Thank you to Julie and her colleagues. Thanks, Manuel. I hand the floor now to the United States, to Sarah, I think is online.
Hi, thank you, Martin. And I will, excuse me, echo Manuel's thanks to the Secretariat. The Central Emergency Response Fund plays an extremely important role in responding to increasing needs and notably ensuring timely funding to the COVID response last year. The CERF's comparative advantage is evident in its capacity to act quickly when humanitarian crises deteriorate, such as the contribution to Afghanistan earlier this year, and to bolster underfunded responses, such as that in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The value of the CERF is underscored by the recently completed Multilateral Organization Assessment Network Review of OCHA, which USAID supported as a co-institutional lead. The review gave the agency high marks for its management of the CERF in quickly responding to humanitarian needs. We recognize the incredible work of OCHA in coordination with humanitarian partners across the globe to ensure scarce humanitarian resources are reaching those most in need, and we look forward to continuing our strong partnership in the years to come. I'm pleased to announce that USAID's Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance is renewing its investment in the CERF and plans for the first time in many years to make a contribution in 2022 to bolster the life-saving work in most challenging and often forgotten places. While our contribution is modest, it's nonetheless a start and in full recognition of the valuable role of the CERF and the importance of multilateralism. In addition, we hope that our contribution helps to catalyze others to increase their commitments to the CERF. Humanitarian needs, as we all know, are at an all-time high, and as the largest humanitarian donor in the world, we encourage other donors to do more. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and a warm welcome back. Very good to have you with us in the CERF, but also, of course, your generosity globally is well witnessed. I hand the floor now to Canada. Bob, who is with us here in person. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. It's good to be here and appreciate very much what the Americans have just announced. It's a wonderful introduction to what I have to say. Very pleased to follow those remarks. As we mark the 15th anniversary of the Central Emergency Response Fund, I have to say we do so with a mix of both pride and sadness. We're very proud that this modest fund, which originally conceived to address what were called forgotten crises, and to prime the pump in response to rapid onset emergencies until the system kicks into gear, it's had really an outsized impact in terms of saving lives and also in terms of changing the humanitarian system. And I have to say sadness because, in fact, the need for CERF has only grown, as everyone here knows, and as many people have already said. We face political crises without end, and far more complex natural disasters. The data is clear. Humanitarian needs have more than tripled in the last decade. I think it would be great if our home governments would understand that a little better when we look and consider how, in fact, this is an ongoing and very substantial crisis, and one that is not going to get better quickly, given the impact of COVID and the impact of climate change, which are contributing, and the increase in conflict. We put these three C's together, and we begin to see the nature of the challenge that we face. We have substantial needs, and we have to respond to them. I'm proud to say that from the beginning, we have strongly and materially constantly supported the CERF, investing over $500 million Canadian, which is about $400 million US, to date. For Canada, the CERF is an indispensable element of our global commitments to the architecture. The CERF's timely and rapid response to crises is instrumental to addressing the most urgent humanitarian needs, such as we're seeing today in Afghanistan as well as in Ethiopia. I think it's also important that we recognize the catalytic impact, which a number of other speakers have talked about, in fostering innovation in the whole system, evident recently with a pioneering work to test and advance what was talked about in the video of anticipatory action. We've also welcomed the dedicated envelope of $25 million to respond to sexual and gender-based violence over the course of the pandemic. We think this focus is one that should inform the entire humanitarian system. And if I may say so, not only on the sexual and gender issues, but also with respect to the vulnerability of people with disabilities and other vulnerable and marginal groups whose needs are frequently ignored at this time. Alors, que le fond continue.
So, may the fund continue to promote these innovative approaches. We would like to underscore our commitment to learning and evaluation. This guidance helps the whole of the humanitarian system to better understand the needs of those most severely affected by crises and conflicts and better respond to their needs. At the pledging conference in 2020, Canada was delighted to announce a pledge, a pluriannual pledge indeed, to the tune of 88.2 million Canadian dollars over a period of 3 years, from 2021 to 2023. The pledged financing is included 29.5 million for 2022. We expect that all states that can do so will support this mechanism. And I can assure you that we will have a healthy discussion with OCHA this year to discuss the period beyond 2023. The world is still severely shaken by the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Consequently, the time has come to join forces and build on the strong support of the last 15 years. And having supported the fund for 15 years, Canada is now committed to a fund for all and shared by all. The fund is the very expression of the spirit of solidarity at a global level.
Bob, thank you very much. And thank you, Canada, for it's a storied donor in terms of its policies as well as its generosity. And thank you for the pledge and the continuing support. And I'm also thank you for your 3 C's, COVID, climate, and conflict. And never have these 3 been so prevalent and so threatening as today. Thanks very much to Canada. I now hand the floor to my friend Abdullah of Yemen, Ambassador.
بالشكر للصندوق المركزي لمواجهة
I thank CERF that has played and continues to play an important role to offer shelter to refugees and displaced persons following the attacks from Houthi militia, namely in Marib, that constitute ferocious attacks indeed. These CERF constitutes the last resort and source of shelter for 14 million people. Challenges are mounting up at a breakneck speed across the world, and consequently we hope that Yemen will remain among the priorities of CERF so that the humanitarian suffering of many can be mitigated. Here I wish to congratulate CERF. CERF helps us to meet the humanitarian challenges facing us, and CERF provides us with financing for provides several countries with financing, namely my country, Yemen. CERF also helps us to save lives. CERF has helped respond to the grave needs facing us with $39.9 million spread across several sectors, sectors of the population risking famine and displacement, namely the governorates of Marib and Al Ghouf. CERF provides assistance to 10.2 million people in Yemen, providing humanitarian assistance, and CERF helps the health sector particularly to face up to COVID-19, but the situation remains fragile. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all countries that support the fund and that do so to heed the appeal launched by the Secretary-General, and we hope that all countries will continue to provide their generous assistance to CERF. Thank you.
Many thanks, Abdullah. Thank you. I hand the floor to the Permanent Representative of Kuwait. Mansour, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, I would like to congratulate you on the 15th anniversary of CERF. This fund is a real achievement of 2005. It illustrated that the international community took the right decision to improve emergency, urgent, effective humanitarian action. We commend your work and your leading role in shoring up humanitarian responsibilities to this end. I would commend you for acceding to your post. Sir, humanitarian crises and conflicts ravage the world. This is a good opportunity to underscore the importance of concerted efforts. These conflicts and crises are increasing in numbers. We need to step up our efforts. We need to cooperate. We need to divide up tasks in order to provide assistance to people in difficulty. Each person in difficulty should receive aid. Kuwait is underscoring the importance of CERF since it was set up in 2006. CERF has managed to respond to emergency situations in more than 100 countries. Kuwait, in order to help CERF as part of its multilateral assistance, provides financial assistance to this fund. I wish to announce Kuwait's commitment, a voluntary commitment of $1 million for 2022. In conclusion, we congratulate all those stakeholders in CERF, including the advisory group that provides advice and assistance in order to supply emergency aid to people in difficulty. Thank you.
Mansour, thank you. I hand the floor to the Honourable Representative of Spain.
It is a pleasure to participate in this event that is very important indeed. Spain believes that humanitarian action which is coordinated, effective, multilateral and based on core principles is more important now than ever before. 2021 was a key year, seeing an increase in the number of people that require humanitarian assistance. Pre-existing needs and the slow recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic require from us an equitable, coordinated response and one with social justice at its core. Indeed, this response is required from across the United Nations system, member states and multilateral financial institutions, as well as the private sector, NGOs and civil society. CERF has proven to be a useful and very effective tool, particularly in contexts of underfinancing, forgotten crises, or sudden onset emergencies. Spain holds in very high esteem indeed the efforts undertaken to devote a budget line to the response to and prevention of sexual and gender-based violence in humanitarian contexts. This indeed is a priority of the Spanish government. Moreover, it would seem to us important to provide support to those countries that, in addition to enduring situations of violence and conflict, are facing the catastrophic effects of climate change. To conclude, first of all, I wish to thank the Secretary-General and for his leadership in a humanitarian and international context that is more complex now than ever before. I'd also like to thank Martin Griffiths for the dynamism with which he began his mandate. The Government of Spain continues to be committed to this fund, and its contribution in 2022 will be to the tune of €2.5 million. I also wish to underscore the role played by Spain's decentralized cooperation agency, Indeed, the Basque agencies and the Basque Agency and Catalan Agency for Cooperation contribute to our work, and those agencies will take the floor subsequently. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your kind words. And we look forward to hearing, as you say, from your colleagues in Catalonia and in the Basque Country in due course. Thanks a lot. I hand the floor to the representative of Cambodia.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Under Secretary General, Excellency, and distinguished delegates. I would like to thank the Secretariat for organizing the 15th high-level pledging event, a fund for all by all, and the invitation extended to Cambodia. On behalf of the Royal Government of Cambodia, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the UN Secretary General for his tireless effort in mobilizing funds to support the UN Central Emergency Response Fund, CERF. Cambodia recognized the critical role that the CERF has played since 2006 in response to the aftermath of natural disaster and saving people's lives across the globe. In this regard, I'm pleased to inform that Cambodia will contribute 30,000 toward the CERF for 2022. I thank you.
And I thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Cambodia. I hand the floor to the Permanent Representative of Australia, Mitch. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Martin and colleagues. Last week we heard from the USG that 2021 was the most challenging year for the humanitarian system so far. And as we make our pledges to the CERF today, we really do face the grim reality that 2022 will continue to bring escalating humanitarian needs, as most colleagues have mentioned, exacerbated by COVID, conflict and extreme weather. And in this difficult global context, the CERF really does continue to play a crucial role in the resilience and adaptability of humanitarian systems. And CERF funding has catalysed anticipatory action and responded to critical humanitarian needs around the world. Now, while the phrase catalysing anticipatory action may sound like bureaucratic speak, it actually represents something remorselessly practical. And it's timely that we do pause to reflect and acknowledge that, as colleagues have. Martin, Australia welcomes CERF's response to disasters and crises in our region, the Indo-Pacific, including life-saving assistance to people in Myanmar, Bangladesh and Afghanistan. And Australia commends CERF's efforts to channel resources to assist the most vulnerable, including support for reproductive health and programs, and assisting persons with disability. We especially welcome the thematic CERF allocations, which support the empowerment of women and girls, and specifically focus on addressing gender-based violence in humanitarian emergencies. Martin, we recognise your ongoing commitment to anticipatory action. This important work is one of the reasons why the CERF is leading greater efficiency through innovation in contemporary crises and is an essential means of reducing humanitarian need. And it's clear that 2022 will bring immense challenges, and we encourage all our donor colleagues to commit to predictable multi-year contributions to the CERF, and for UN partners to do more to cascade flexible donor contributions to their NGO and local partners. For our part, Australia is proud to be a long-time supporter of the CERF, and we affirm our existing commitment of $11 million in 2022 as part of a multi-year commitment of $66 million over 6 years. We thank very much the CERF Secretariat and UN partners for their efforts in this particularly difficult year. And just in conclusion, simply put, CERF works.
Thank you very much, Mitch. And as you were reminding us, last week we launched the world's largest ever humanitarian plan, which comes to a total of $41 billion for 2022. It's a phenomenal target. It's 183 million people to be reached in that year. CERF will have a central role in this. And it will be ever more important as the year goes on. And I agree with you about the anticipatory action. Sounds a bit dull and dry, but it is in fact practical and foresightful, and it makes the dollar go further. Thank you very much indeed. Over to the representative of Poland.
Secretary General, dear Martin, Excellencies, Poland observes with growing concerns the dramatic rise in the number and unprecedented scale of humanitarian crises all over the world. Their scope and number, coupled with the growing gap in funding worldwide, results in dire consequences which are especially dramatic for the most vulnerable groups such as children, women, people with disabilities, and internally displaced people. Those groups are always at the heart of the Polish humanitarian assistance. As an active ODSG member and a committed partner of the UN OCHA, Poland has provided regular contributions to the organization. As for the earmark funds, this year Poland has decided to make 2 contributions to UN OCHA office in Syria, providing 1.25 million Polish zloty, and to UN OCHA office in Ethiopia, providing 1 million Polish zloty. On CERF's 15th anniversary, Poland wants to highlight the importance of well-coordinated multilateral actions to rely on the continuous commitment of the member states. Poland understands the role of flexible funding in effective humanitarian response and highly appreciates the CERF's unique role in the multilateral humanitarian aid system. In the past 15 years, CERF has become an important instrument of timely and effective humanitarian assistance. One of the pillars of its success is an omnipotence and reactivity, and with quick response in every corner of the globe, in Africa, Middle East, Europe, Asia, and the Pacific and the Americas. We perceive CERF as crucially, especially now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, which has particularly affected parts of the globe with pre-existing humanitarian crises. Recognizing the achievements of the CERF, I'm pleased to announce that in 2022, Poland will contribute 1 million Polish zloty to CERF and is ready to increase that in an immediate crisis. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christoph. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for the pledge. I hand the floor to Croatia, to Ivan, who is here. Voilà.
Distinguished colleagues, I would like to thank the Office for the coordination of the Humanitarian Affairs for organizing this important event. In challenging times like these, marked by conflicts, atrocity crimes and natural disasters, there is no doubt that increasing number of lives depend on humanitarian assistance. Let me commend the UN humanitarian actors for their relentless efforts to provide humanitarian relief in extremely complex environments. Constant increase in humanitarian needs requires our focused attention on the enlargement and making the best use of available resources. The COVID-19 pandemic has confirmed the unpredictable nature of this and a number of other crises. Precisely for this reason, it is important to encourage flexible funding in order to act swiftly and ensure that aid reaches those who need it the most. In respect to this, CERF has continuously demonstrated its fast, coordinated and effective responses to emergencies and crises around the world. Croatia also fully supports the extraordinary work CERF has done to assist fragile and conflict-affected countries. Adhering to the principles of humanity and solidarity reflected also in SG's report, Our Common Agenda, we share commitment to support global humanitarian response. I'm pleased to announce that the government of Croatia decided to support a central emergency response fund with a contribution of $30,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I hand the floor to Slovenia.
Thank you, Chair. Slovenia strongly supports CERF as the leading global emergency response fund that has been providing life-saving support with speed, predictability and flexibility for millions of people for the last 15 years. Due to rapidly growing humanitarian needs, the role of the CERF has become even more important. As the world has been fighting the COVID-19 pandemic for the past 2 years, the impact on the most fragile countries and the most vulnerable people is alarming. The world's poorest who lack access to food, water and sanitation are facing an unprecedented threat and hardship. Gender-based violence, exclusion based on disability and debt vulnerability are on the rise. In this context, the protection of vulnerable groups, especially women, children and displaced people, is vital. Slovenia places the protection of such groups at the heart of its humanitarian action, also during the ongoing presidency of the Council of the European in the second half of this year. Our priorities also include global health, access to water, respect for international humanitarian law, and digitalization as an efficient tool for humanitarian action. In 2021, we have provided humanitarian assistance through various international organizations and in many regions, such as Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, DR Congo, Venezuela, Haiti, Madagascar, Nigeria, South Sudan, among others. Slovenia will continue to support CERF. Due to the budgetary cycle, we are not yet in a position to announce the exact contribution for 2022. However, I can confirm and reaffirm that Slovenia will continue to support CERF in the following years. To conclude, the current global humanitarian situation reminds us of the need for a coordinated approach, flexible funding and long-term sustainable solutions. Positive outcomes can only be secured through multilateral cooperation and mutually beneficial partnership among all stakeholders. In this regard, the hard work and efficiency of CERF is an outstanding example and invaluable contribution to the humanitarian response system. I thank you, Chair.
Many, many thanks, and thank you for those last words as well. I hand the floor to the representative of Algeria. I think I do.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs for organizing this important event. I wish also to thank the Secretary General for his insightful remarks, reaffirming the importance of this pledging event as we mark the 50th anniversary of the creation of CERF. My delegation takes this opportunity to reaffirm its full support to the critical role of CERF as the world's global emergency fund, delivering fast and effective life-saving assistance wherever and whenever a crisis hit. It is crucial to reaffirm our commitment to ensure that the CERF remains fit to respond to the complexities of global humanitarian needs. The persistence of conflicts and natural disasters compounded with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic have resulted in many challenges, including an increasing number of people in need of humanitarian assistance. This implies the need to devote increased resources to promote durable solutions and address the root causes of forced displacement, beginning with conflicts. A reliable and sustainable humanitarian UN system is also needed now more than ever. CERF is crucial in this respect as it promotes early action and response to reduce loss of life and strengthen humanitarian response in underfunded situations. For its part, Algeria remains attached to the principle of international solidarity and continues to host and provide protection and assistance to refugees, including the Sahrawi refugees. We spare no efforts to ensure that all refugees have access to essential services, and we have stepped up our humanitarian aid to respond to their specific needs arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. Algeria also continues to provide humanitarian and medical aid on a regular basis to many brotherly countries, particularly in its neighboring region. Finally, as part of our contribution to the humanitarian response efforts, Algeria donated $20,000 to CERF in 2021, and we are ready to step up our commitment to the fund in the future to support its humanitarian action towards forcibly displaced persons in the world, in particular refugees in Africa. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I hand the floor to the representative of New Zealand.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the
United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs for convening this important event and to acknowledge the 15th anniversary of the CERF. I'd also like to acknowledge the opening remarks made by the Secretary-General Antonio Guterres and by yourself, USG Griffiths. The CERF is a proven mechanism for rapidly responding to humanitarian and unfunded crises. Its innovative approach continues to catalyse humanitarian action and improve the humanitarian system, and it remains one of the most effective tools for donors to play their part in responding to major global humanitarian crises. We welcome the CERF's focus on cash assistance and anticipatory action. We support the CERF showing how anticipatory action can be scaled up across the humanitarian system. We also welcome recent moves by the CERF in support of inclusive humanitarian action, including addressing gender-based violence and in seeking and incorporating expert advice on gender and disability considerations. We see the CERF as being most effective when it maintains its focus on life-saving interventions and when emphasis is placed on rapid response. CERF's effective, innovative and catalytic approach, along with its global reach, enables donors like Aotearoa New Zealand to contribute to a wide range of humanitarian crises we otherwise would not be able to support directly. This is why we provide multi-year funding to the CERF. Aotearoa New Zealand makes an annual unearmarked contribution of $3 million New Zealand dollars to the CERF. In recent years, we've also periodically made additional contributions, with the latest of these being $2.5 million New Zealand in December 2020, in recognition of the role that the CERF is playing in addressing the unprecedented levels of food insecurity and in famine mitigation. Today, Aotearoa New Zealand is pleased to pledge a further $3 million New Zealand dollars a year for the coming 3 years. We are proud to support the efforts of the CERF and remain committed to being a predictable, reliable donor to support the humanitarian system to respond to priorities swiftly, efficiently and inclusively. In closing, we acknowledge the important work the CERF does, and we thank you, USG Griffiths, for your continued leadership of the CERF and of the UN humanitarian system. We thank all humanitarian workers for their dedication. You can count on us for continued support. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much indeed, and for your generosity. A genuine indication of the global nature of this support. Thank you. And now I hand the floor to the Russian Federation, Dmitry.
Distinguished Mr. Griffiths, today's pledging conference for CERF is extremely important and timely. For the second year in a row, there is a historic poor record in the number of people in need throughout the world. The pandemic is ongoing with all of its consequences. As a result of these processes, the humanitarian response system in the UN is overworked, and there's underfunding of humanitarian calls. Last year, in our joint efforts, CERF managed to collect about $600 million, and we are near to the announced amount of $1 billion. In this regard, I would separately like to thank you, Mr. Griffiths, for your efforts as the head of the fund, for your strategic vision and for your swift response to crisis situations. The matter of providing humanitarian assistance has always been one of the key priorities on the international agenda. It's important to maintain its unifying character and to ensure there's no politicization of humanitarian assistance. The winners, there will be no winners in that, and the losers would be, in fact, the most vulnerable people themselves. Russia has got involved in the work of the fund and did so some 10 years ago, and since then our participation has become long-term and predictable. I am delighted to announce our country's contribution for 2022 to the tune of $1.5 million. Thank you very much, and thank you for the excellent interpretation.
Thanks very much indeed, and thank you to Russia for that, and thank you for your consistent presence on the fund, as well as your kind words about me. It's very important that you are there. Thank you very much indeed. I'll now ask for we don't call it movies, do we? A film on on what was referred to by one representative here as the shadow epidemic of gender-based violence, an epidemic that is also increased hugely in incidence as in relationship to COVID. So the film will now show how CERF responds to this particular epidemic. And then we will resume statements from the floor. I think those of us who've had the unfortunate privilege of meeting some of the victims of gender-based violence would be very pleased to see the support for the activities, in this case from UNFPA, Fund for Population Activities, providing a mercy to those who suffered the most in conflicts of recent times. Thank you. Now I resume statements from the floor, and I'll ask the representative of Bangladesh to speak first. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Excellencies, I join others in congratulating CERF on its 15th anniversary. USG Griffiths, thank you for your excellent leadership in steering CERF's work during this crisis period since your appointment earlier this year. I wish to assure you of my delegation's full and continued support in the days ahead. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, CERF has an exceptional track record of ensuring rapid and effective response to humanitarian emergencies. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it has once again proven its mettle and utility from ensuring health-related support to humanitarian livelihood assistance and continuity of critical supply chains to access to food. I pay my tribute to the dedicated CERF staff across the world who are risking their lives daily to serve humanity. As a country faced with complex and multifaceted humanitarian emergencies caused by natural disasters, climate change, as well as repeated influx of refugees and displaced persons, Bangladesh attaches great importance to CERF's work. Yet we also recognize that there is room for efficiency gains in its work, especially in terms of enhanced coordination between its disbursement arms and the national governments. We expect that the fund will push for innovative and more evidence-based planning in crisis assessment and delivery of rapid response. Mr. Chairman, given CERF's global reach and convening role as a critical humanitarian arm of the UN, and heeding the call of the Secretary General to invest more in CERF in light of the increased global humanitarian needs during this pandemic, Bangladesh will continue to support it. I'm pleased to announce that Bangladesh will be contributing $25,000 to CERF as an earmarked flexible fund for the year 2022. While this is a modest contribution, it represents our steadfast commitment to the humanitarian work of the United Nations to help those most in need. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. You may say it's modest, but it's very important, and I'm very grateful to you for that commitment. Thank you. I hand the floor to the representative of Belgium.
Mr. Chair, distinguished colleagues, the Global Humanitarian Overview 2022 paints a bleak picture. Driven by conflicts, climate change, and the effects of COVID-19, humanitarian needs have increased dramatically. Hard-won development gains in employment, food security, education, and healthcare have been reversed. Extreme poverty and hunger are rising to unparalleled levels, and never have there been more people displaced by conflict. To be able to assist all these people needing humanitarian assistance and protections in 2022, a staggering $41 billion is now required. These developments demand massive action. Belgium believes in principled and coordinated humanitarian assistance. We strongly value the Central Emergency Response Fund as a critical tool for all, by all, to ensure timely, coordinated, and flexible aid for millions of people around the world. As we just saw in the film, women and girls suffer disproportionately in conflict, with over 70% having experienced gender-based violence. The pandemic has also dealt a major blow to gender parity, women's employment, and disrupted global education. Belgium welcomes the CERF allocation dedicated to gender-based violence response. The lack of funding for the mitigation and prevention of gender-based violence remains of critical concern and must be addressed. Support to women-led organizations and the strengthening of women's leadership at local level is also paramount. Excellencies, in these challenging times, it is crucial to ensure that resources be readily available whenever disaster strikes. Since CERF's inception in 2006, my country has been a loyal partner as well as a stable and predictable donor with flexible funding increasing steadily over the years. This year, we are pleased to announce that our contribution for 2022 will amount to 17 million euro. As we engage on a 2-year basis, we are looking at a total of 34 million for 2021 and 2022. This multi-annual contribution reflects our policy to dedicate a maximum of unearmarked funds to our partner organization. This policy is in line with the principles of good humanitarian donorship on predictability and flexibility of humanitarian financing, to which Belgium subscribed. Belgium strongly encourages donor states to equally consider multi-annual contributions to the CERF. Finally, Mr. Chair, may I kindly request that once Member States have delivered their statements, the floor will be given to the representative of the Flemish delegation, who will announce an additional pledge of the regional government of Flanders. I thank you.
Yeah, and I thank you too for that considerable generosity of 17 million is a lot of money. Thank you very much indeed. And of course, we will provide the floor for the representative of Flanders. I hand the floor now to Japan, to Tetsuya.
Thank you, Mr. USG Griffiths. Japan welcomes that CERF marks its 15th anniversary this year. Japan highly values CERF's significant role in promoting rapid response in the initial stage of humanitarian crisis and in addressing underfunded emergencies or neglected crises. Japan, therefore, has supported CERF since its inception. In addition to COVID-19 and climate change, conflicted political unrest in areas such as Afghanistan and Ethiopia have exacerbated the humanitarian situation in the world. As global humanitarian needs are growing, CERF is now more important than ever. The Japanese government is currently examining its contribution to CERF for the year 2022. I therefore cannot pledge today, but it will be duly informed after the decision is made. Japan will continue to consider its contribution to CERF and respond to the financial needs of humanitarian organizations, fully taking into account OCHA's flash appeals. We hope that Japan's assistance and the funding channeled through CERF will complement each other and create positive synergies. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Tetsuya. Thank you, Japan. For that, I'll hand the floor to the representative of Liechtenstein.
Thank you very much, Chair. Since its creation 15 years ago, CERF has become one of the most important and efficient international mechanisms to address humanitarian emergencies. Liechtenstein's niche approach to humanitarian assistance has a special emphasis on flexible funding and underfunded appeals, which aligns with the CERF's policy principles. I'm pleased to announce that we will again contribute 200,000 Swiss francs for the year 2022 for the 16th year in a row. Liechtenstein has hence contributed to CERF every year since the fund has been established, and we are happy to see others make contributions to CERF. CERF increases the reliability of humanitarian funding while remaining very flexible and swift in its allocation. We welcome that states and other partners have contributed 548 million to CERF, while more contributions are necessary to achieve our agreed funding target of $1 billion. Ultimately, it should be in our collective interest to increase the share of humanitarian activities in the regular UN budget, given that they represent the core function of our organization. Let me also take this opportunity, Mr. Chair, to thank you for your leadership since taking over your role as Emergency Relief Coordinator. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you personally. Thank you very much indeed. I hand the floor to the representative of Thailand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. On behalf of the Thai delegation, I would like to thank the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs for organizing this annual pledging event. During these past 2 years, the United Nations has been through one of the toughest solidarity tests in our history. The impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated existing challenges of climate change, disasters, conflicts, and other situations that cause humanitarian needs, notwithstanding the new emergencies erupted this year. Thailand has been a consistent supporter of the Central Emergency Response Fund since its inception in 2005 and has consistently contributed to the fund. In this regard, on behalf of the government of the Kingdom of Thailand, I have the pleasure of pledging $20,000 to the fund for next year. We commend the work of the CERF, especially during the past year, to bring timely assistance to those most in need. Thailand therefore encourages all partners, including the private sectors and financial institutions, to continue supporting the CERF and its important work in the coming years. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
And thank you very much indeed. Also, I hand the floor to the representative of France. I think. Is France not with us? I guess not. In that case, I hand the floor to the representative of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
سعادة وكيل الأمين العام للشؤون الإنسانية ومنسق.
Cool. Under Secretary General, representatives of OCHA, Excellencies, first of all, I wish to thank you for convening this high-level event for pledges to CERF. I wish to thank you for the opportunity given to us to contribute as we mark the 15th anniversary of CERF's creation. Saudi Arabia has always responded to international humanitarian crises, heeding the United Nations appeals to support the organization's effort to face up to challenges, whether these arise from natural disasters or from famine at an international level. Moreover, other programs to combat drought and famine are ones that we've contributed to, and we've done so to save lives. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has provided assistance to the WHO to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic, and we've supported a vast number of countries directly to allow them to tackle the pandemic through the King Salman Center. We provided medical equipment and vaccines as needed. Saudi Arabia has always faced up to crises when we've been asked to do so, and we've brought assistance when required as a result of war or natural disasters. We have supported the Central Emergency Response Fund to tackle natural disasters in April this year. We continue to provide humanitarian assistance. We will continue that work alongside the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and this in order to reduce international suffering. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I should have called on the representative of China earlier. I'm sorry. Over to you, sir.
Mr. President, Mr. Chair, the world is still living in the grips of COVID-19 pandemic with renewed waves of infections. The global economic recovery remains fragile, and COVID-19 is posing daunting challenges. Food insecurity has escalated in some parts of the world, and humanitarian needs have multiplied exponentially. Thanks to the generous donations from the parties, CERF has been able to reallocate funds to provide emergency humanitarian assistance to people caught up in crises and has played an important role in alleviating humanitarian situation caused by the pandemic, climate change, and armed conflict. China has always attached great importance to and participated in the global humanitarian affairs and supported OCHA in playing an organizing and coordinating role in delivering assistance to major humanitarian crises. Since 2007, and to the best of its ability, China has been making annual voluntary contributions to CERF. And the transfer of this contribution has been completed. Since the onset of COVID-19, China has been actively engaged in the international cooperation to fight the pandemic. So far, we have provided material to fight the pandemic to more than 150 countries and 13 international organizations, and has provided 1.85 billion doses of vaccines to more than 120 countries and international organizations. China hopes that OCHA will continue to play its coordinating role and strive to expand CERF's funding level through expanded funding efforts and promote the parties in upholding humanitarian spirit and working together to advance the global humanitarian cause. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much indeed, and again, regrets. Thank you. I now call on France, back in proper order. Monsieur le Marchand. No, I don't. Voilà.
Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to thank the Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs for convening this meeting. It is an extremely useful one, in particular because CERF has once again proved this year, as it has done in previous years, its effectiveness and its inestimable value in terms of meeting urgent needs and deteriorating humanitarian crises. We furthermore commend the financing of early actions. That is a very important part of the work of the fund, and we encourage further financing along these lines. While in 2022, more than 274 million people throughout the world will need humanitarian aid, the fund is going to have to play an even more significant role. This is why France intends to continue to significantly increase its financial contribution to the fund in 2022. I would also like to underscore that France will co-organize in January, along with the European Commission, the European Humanitarian Forum. This is an event that will in particular tackle the issue of the gap between humanitarian needs and available financing. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. I now turn to interventions from regional governments. And it gives me great personal pleasure to request the representative of the Basque Agency for Development Cooperation to speak. Thank you so much.
Excellencias.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to begin by thanking the Under-Secretary General and the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs for convening us here today and for their leadership. As a delegate of the Basque government in the United States, I'm addressing you on behalf of the Basque Agency for Development Cooperation. The Basque government has financed humanitarian projects since the beginning of its international solidarity policy, which was launched in the 90s. Since then, it has supported 471 initiatives to the tune of more than 95 million euros in contexts such as Palestine, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, North Africa, Colombia, or Central America. This agency of the Basque government has been planning and managing development policies since 2011 as a demonstration of its commitment to humanitarian action. This agency has a strategy running from 2018 to 2023, and 10 to 15% of the available funds every year are devoted to this strategy. Moreover, the agency, within its remit and in line with its capacity, is contributing to several of the commitments of the Grand Bargain as a way to increase the participation of people in decision-making processes, and as a way to support local and national stakeholders, and as a way to simplify criteria for justification and transparency. The Basque humanitarian strategy is seeking humanitarian responses to emergencies which are more coordinated and effective. We wish to ensure that we take into account the complexity of all contexts and the manifold needs generated by various crises. Consequently, we reserve a percentage of our humanitarian funds to contribute to global funds and appeals such as CERF. For the first time in 2019, the Basque country contributed 100,000 euros to CERF. This contribution rose to 200,000 euros in 2020, and that was maintained for 2021. In 2022, the Basque country intends to contribute 200,000 euros to CERF. In this way, the Basque government is, as a regional government, is joining the international humanitarian system and renewing its commitment to respecting the dignity and rights of those who suffer in humanitarian crises. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to the Basque people. Thank you, and to the Spanish people. I should have asked, I again regret, the representative of Guyana to speak, who I will ask now, and then after that, the representative of Flanders. So Guyana as a member state. And I now have more. Yeah, Guyana next, anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Guyana recognizes the critical importance of the Central Emergency Response Fund in ensuring that timely and necessary assistance reaches those most in need in all parts of the world. We especially commend CERF for the work done in the face of increasing humanitarian challenges and in supporting the most vulnerable populations. We welcome the increasing focus on preemptive action and the strengthened support to underfunded areas, including for women and girls facing gender-based violence, persons with disabilities, and in ensuring that children living in protracted emergencies receive education. The COVID-19 pandemic has added another layer of challenge on top of existing humanitarian emergencies caused by conflict, disease, natural disasters, and the intensifying impacts of climate change. Enabled by support from member states and other partners, CERF has been able to respond effectively and make a difference. Guyana has been contributing to the fund since 2008, and I am pleased to announce that the government of Guyana will contribute $3,000 to CERF for the year 2022. While this is a modest contribution, it is an indication of our continued commitment to the humanitarian work of the United Nations in helping those most in need. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I hand the floor to the representative of Mongolia. Is the representative of Mongolia here? Online?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. To you, sir. To you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is my honor to participate in today's high-level pledging event on UN's Central Emergency Relief Fund held for its 15-year anniversary. I'm sorry, my ambassador was held in another meeting, so I'm speaking on his behalf. Let me commend the outstanding efforts and achievements by humanitarian workers for life-saving assistance in most corners of the world and delivering on UN's most important humanitarian mandate. In 2021, CERF has again proved to be the most efficient and fast-acting fund for conflict-related crises in Afghanistan, Ethiopia, and for humanitarian crisis in Bangladesh, as well as climate-related crisis in Haiti. Since the establishment of CERF in 2006, global funding needs increased sevenfold and are expected to grow further with emerging climate-related and conflict-affected humanitarian crises. Mongolia highly values the operational activities of the United Nations funds and programs, including UN CERF Its effective work has been of key importance to assist the developing countries for national development priorities in achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Mr. President, as a developing country, we have always contributed to development activities of the United Nations system. To respond to the Secretary General's call for increased funding to serve toward the $1 billion annual target, my delegation wishes to announce Mongolia's pledge of $10,000 for Central Emergency Relief Fund for the year 2022. OCHA's fast, agile, and strategic allocations will continue contributing to a more equitable, more just world, including in better response and recovery after COVID-19 pandemic and in conflict and climate-affected regions, ensuring that no one is left behind. I truly believe that CERF is a fund for all, by all. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much to Mongolia. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the representative of Flanders.
Thank you, Undersecretary General. Excellencies, last year we were highly concerned about the humanitarian challenges ahead. Unfortunately, our fears have come true. Needs are skyrocketing, as presented so clearly by the global humanitarian overview. Even though too many are still being left behind, last year's humanitarian system ensured life-saving support for 107 million people. Focus on improving humanitarian response efficiency has been key. CERF has shown once again to be one of the pillars of a fast response, as funding is readily available when disaster strikes. Also, the fund proves to be an important financial go-to in case of slow protracted crises or neglected ones. That is why Flanders, the northern Dutch-speaking region of Belgium, renews its annual contribution of €600,000 for the year 2022. As the largest regional government donor for the past decade, Flanders will continue encouraging other subnational donations to make CERF a fund by all, for all. In Malawi and Mozambique, Flanders' multi-annual programs to strengthen their humanitarian response is ongoing. We are therefore pleased to see that CERF successfully supported the activation of multi-stakeholder anticipatory action frameworks in Bangladesh, Ethiopia, and Somalia, as we are convinced this is the answer to a more timely and effective action. The pandemic has reignited interest for mental health and psychosocial support. We would like to see this awareness spread across all types of crises. And finally, with gender equality being a core value of our Flemish development cooperation, we highly appreciate the fund's specific focus on tackling gender-based violence through self-assessments and a dedicated financial envelope. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to all speakers. I've completed the list of speakers, and thank you for all speakers being so punctual and timely. I really appreciate that. We have come to a conclusion of this important event, and I'm grateful to all those who have announced pledges here today, also to all those who have announced support and involvement and a sense of affirmation of the CERF globally. It is genuinely a global effort, and as everybody has mentioned, next year is going to be even more important than this, tragically, with those needs. Now, I don't know if we have, So today, the total pledged from 39 donors, and of course there will be more to come, is reached a total of $467,696.54, more or less. We may round it up. Yeah. So about $470 million, and that is a huge progress towards the goal of $1 billion. It's the highest ever pledged at such a day. It gives us great confidence about the year ahead. We're very grateful to those who have pledged and those who will pledge. I want to again, in fact, say to Julie and colleagues how much we rely on you for the professionalism and principle with which you address needs as the year goes by, and I have direct experience of that. So I'm very grateful to everyone for their patience, for their generosity, for their timeliness, and let us work together in 2022 to spend this money wisely for the sake of those in need. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and excellencies.
Yeah. Sorry, colleagues, just one more point. There's a number of pre-recorded messages from our UN agencies and from NGOs that actually are posted on the event webpage, and these will also be circulated through email so that you can follow up on the statements that have not been provided today. Thank you.